Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today, we're going deep into the world of activism.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, we're going to be focusing on this interview with Sowore, a prominent Nigerian activist.
Okay, yeah, I know Sowore.
Yeah, he was on the Honest Bunch podcast, and I have to say, some fascinating stuff in there.
I bet. What kind of stuff are we talking about?
Boy, he's got this really long history of activism going all the way back to when he was in university.
Right back in the early 90s. He's been at it a while.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this interview, it really reveals some surprising contradictions, like his take on social media. Not what you would expect.
Oh, really? Like, how so?
Well, we'll get to that. But first, I want to talk about his early experiences, way back.
Okay, yeah, let's hear it.
So he talks about this intense, really intense experience when he was just 10 years old.
10 years old, wow.
Yeah, police brutality, injustice. This was in his village.
That's awful.
It was. He talks about police invading his village on Christmas Eve. Yeah, it was brutal. He talks about the terror, the brutality, even rape.
That's heavy stuff. I can't imagine it 10 years old.
He was hiding, terrified. His father actually hid in the ceiling.
To avoid getting arrested.
Exactly.
Wow. It really makes you think experiences like that, they shape you, you know?
Totally. You can see how that kind of trauma might fuel a lifelong passion for justice.
For sure. But he doesn't really see it as a reaction to that trauma, though, right?
Yeah, that's what's interesting. He actually pushes back on that.
He does.
He says it was a conscious decision, to fight injustice, not just a response to his own pain.
Huh, interesting. So it was more like a calling.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And it really comes through in his student activism.
Right. He got expelled from university. Twice.
Not once, twice, from the University of Lagos because of his protests against the military regime.
Wow. Talk about commitment.
Seriously. And that commitment, it didn't fade when he left Nigeria for the U.S.
No, I mean, look at Sowore Reporters. That was a huge undertaking.
That's what I'm saying. And get this, he personally wrote over 5,000 corruption stories for that platform.
Wow. Just him and a laptop taking on these powerful figures.
Unbelievable, right? So with all that success, with Sowore Reporters making such an impact.
Why run for president? That was a big shift.
That's the question. It seemed like a big shift, right? From journalism to politics.
Totally. So what was his thinking there?
Well, he felt like journalism, even really hard-hitting investigative journalism.
Yeah, the kind he was doing.
Exactly. He felt like it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
Like it couldn't single-handedly solve Nigeria's problems.
So he felt he needed to be on the inside to make real change.
Yeah, he really came to believe that good governance, that was essential.
And systemic change?
Exactly. But even trying to set up a Sowore Reporters Media Foundation in Nigeria.
Yeah, what happened with that?
He faced so much pushback, like physical assault.
Seriously.
And arrest. It's crazy. He was putting himself on the line.
Wow. Talk about commitment. And this brings us to, well, a kind of controversial topic.
Oh, yeah, this is a big one. Revolution.
He doesn't shy away from it, does he?
Not at all. He's very clear. He believes revolution is the only way.
The only way for real change in Nigeria.
That's what he says. But he's not reckless about it.
What do you mean?
Well, he lays out these very specific conditions for a successful revolution, like what needs to be in place.
Okay, yeah, like what?
He talks about a conscious populace.
Right. People need to be aware.
And minimizing casualties through sheer numbers.
So like a strength in numbers kind of thing?
Exactly. And understanding what's at stake, really understanding.
Makes sense. It can't just be a blind uprising.
No, not at all. And he even acknowledges the fear. A lot of Nigerians are afraid.
Right, I can see that. Fear can be paralyzing.
And that makes it really hard to mobilize people, for a movement like that.
So he's calling for a calculated kind of revolution.
Strategic action, not just blind rage.
Interesting. Really interesting. There's a lot to unpack there. It's wild. Throughout the whole interview, he's just so candid.
I know, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't sugarcoat anything.
Not at all. He's open about everything. The challenges, the setbacks, even moments of doubt.
And fear.
Yeah, even fear. It's refreshing, isn't it?
It makes him seem so human.
Yeah, relatable. He's not preaching from some pedestal.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's like he's right there in the trenches with everyone else.
Grappling with all the messy realities.
Of trying to make a difference.
In a system that's designed to resist you.
Exactly. But there's still this hope there.
There is. You can feel it, right?
Absolutely. It's not naive hope, though.
No, not at all. It's like forged in fire, you know.
Battle-tested hope.
Yeah, exactly. Tempered by all those experiences.
And the knowledge that change is hard, like it requires sacrifice.
And strategy. You can tell he's a man of conviction, but he's also incredibly insightful.
Oh, absolutely. His take on education, for example.
Oh, yeah. What do you say about that?
Well, he challenges this idea that formal education is like the only way to be conscious.
Interesting. So what does he see as the path to awareness then?
He says suffering can be a teacher.
Whoa. Okay.
Like lived experience, it could be just as valuable as any textbook, you know?
When it comes to understanding the need for change.
Exactly. And let's be real, most Nigerians, they've experienced some form of suffering.
Because of the system, yeah.
So that's a lot of potential activists.
People who get it, you know, who've lived it.
But he also talks about how Nigerians view activists.
How so?
It's like we put them on a pedestal.
We idolize them.
Exactly. And that sets them up for failure.
Because no one can live up to that.
Yeah, like we expect them to be superhuman, perfect.
And when they make mistakes, it's like a betrayal.
And it creates this disillusionment.
Which is damaging to the movement.
It is. And so Sowore seems to be pushing back against that.
In what way?
He's like, look, I'm not perfect. I'm just trying to do what's right.
It's an important message. And he's not afraid to call out those who, like, don't walk the walk.
Oh, yeah. He talks about organized outrage.
What's that?
Like labor leaders who make a big show of fighting for the people.
But then they cut deals that benefit themselves.
And the elites? It's performative.
Right, right. But isn't there a danger in calling everything performative? I mean, at what point does speaking out become, like, real action?
I mean, that's a good question. It's tricky.
Where's the line?
It is, because raising awareness is important.
But it has to lead to something?
To tangible change.
That's true.
And this is where his take on social media in Nigeria gets interesting.
Okay, I'm curious.
He sees it as this double-edged sword.
How so?
Well, on one hand, it gives a voice to the voiceless.
It can amplify those who are often silenced?
But on the other hand, it can breed misinformation.
Yeah, and tribalism and even harassment.
So what's the solution, right?
Does he think we should censor it?
That's the thing, he doesn't. He thinks we need to address the root causes.
The underlying injustices that fuel these online conflicts.
Exactly. It's not about silencing people.
But about creating a more just society.
Where people don't feel the need to resort to those extremes.
So it's deeper than social media, it's societal.
Totally. And brings us back to revolution.
Okay. How so?
Well, he's suggesting that true revolution, it's not just about overthrowing a government.
It's about changing the way we think.
The way we interact. The way we engage in dialogue.
It's like a revolution of consciousness?
Yes. A total shift in mindset.
Rejecting tribalism, embracing critical thinking.
Putting the collective good above individual gain.
It's a tall order.
It is.
Yeah.
But his story shows that change, even radical change.
It's possible.
If people are willing to stand up.
Even when it's hard, when it's dangerous.
I keep thinking about what he said about Nigerians being afraid to speak up.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
He says the most sensible Nigerians are often the most silent.
Because fear.
Fear of the consequences. It's scary to think about.
It makes you wonder, are we all just conditioned to be afraid?
To fear those in power, to the point where we can't speak truth to power.
That's a tough question.
It is. What silences us, you know? What would it take to break free from that?
To engage in real dialogue about the changes we want.
These are big questions.
They are, but important ones.
If we want a better future.
And Sowore, he might not have all the answers, but he gives us a framework.
For thinking about these issues.
And a powerful example of what it means to be a committed activist.
Speaking of examples, that story he told about visiting Nnamdi Kanu.
Oh, yeah. What was that about?
Trying to understand his perspective on the Biafran struggle.
Right, right. And what did he find?
Well, turns out Kanu didn't necessarily want Nigeria to break up.
Wow, really? That goes against the common narrative.
It does. What he wanted was a referendum.
A referendum.
To be in the Constitution.
So people could decide their own fate.
Exactly. It's about having a voice, having agency.
It just shows, even in movements that seem completely opposite,
there can be common ground.
A shared desire for justice.
And that's where dialogue is so important.
Spaces for those conversations.
Even when there are disagreements.
Listening to understand, not just to respond.
Recognizing different perspectives.
Do you think Sowore embodies that approach?
I think he does.
His whole story is about dialogue.
engaging with all kinds of people.
Activists, politicians, everyday people.
Challenging assumptions, being challenged himself.
It's what makes him so compelling.
He's not just talking about change, he's living it.
And inspiring others along the way.
He's like a catalyst for a new generation.
Of activists who aren't afraid to speak truth to power.
To demand accountability, to fight for a better future.
One thing that really stood out to me was Sowore's belief in people.
Yeah, like he doesn't see himself as some kind of savior.
More like a facilitator, you know?
Helping people realize their own power.
Exactly, to take control.
He even talks about how throughout history, the biggest changes,
They don't come from the top.
they come from the bottom up.
People demanding better.
And it's not just those big revolutionary moments.
Right, it's also the everyday things.
Speaking out, holding leaders accountable.
Not being complicit in a system that's messed up.
Yeah, changing the narrative.
From apathy to action.
And that's where his take on social media comes in, which is interesting.
How so?
He sees it as this tool for mobilization.
For organizing, for holding people accountable.
He knows it's got its flaws.
But it lets ordinary citizens challenge the mainstream narrative.
And amplifies voices that would otherwise be silenced.
It's about democratizing information.
But it's not enough to just be online, right?
No, it has to translate to real-world action.
Protests, demands for change.
He's realistic about the risks, though.
The violence, the suppression.
But he still believes in the power of collective action.
When people unite, they can overcome anything.
It's a message that resonates, especially when people feel powerless.
Like there's no hope.
But he's not about despair. He's about empowerment.
Believing in ourselves, believing in each other.
What really stuck with you from this interview?
I think it's how he balances that revolutionary spirit.
With strategy, with nonviolence.
It's not just about anger.
It's about turning that anger into effective action.
Being strategic, thoughtful, persistent.
And never losing sight of the goal.
A just and equitable society for everyone.
This deep dive with Sowore has been fascinating.
We hope you'll keep exploring these ideas.
Learn from his experiences.
And find your own way to make a difference.
Remember, even small acts of resistance can have a big impact.
Every voice matters.
Sowore reminds us that hope isn't passive.
It's something we create through our actions.
So think about it. What will it take for you to break free from that fear and join the chorus demanding change?
Until next time, keep diving deep.
Keep questioning. Keep believing in the power of your voice.